Hello, my name is Yudi. Aging Gracefully deals with all the insults of aging. Yes, I call them insults of aging because they just invade you and enjoy your body or your bodily process as you age. On this program, we try to educate you and inform you of all those insults, enabling you to deal with them, fight them all the way, and age gracefully. And today we have Dr. Abayomi Ayesimoju, a neurologist. Neurology deals with the brain and the nerves, and he'll be telling us about some of the indignities of aging. How many times have you reached out to make a call? Was you 50s, 60s, and then you suddenly forget who you are trying to call? Well, we're going to be dealing and talking about that so that you know you're not alone. It's some of the indignities that as you approach menopause and andropause, it happens to you. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Neurology, what is it about?
Neurology is that field of medicine that deals with conditions of the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. You distinguish it from neurosurgery in the sense that we as neurologists do not carry out surgical operations on the brain or nerves or the spinal cord. You also distinguish it from psychiatry in the sense that we deal with ailments basically to do with physical changes or physical conditions of the brain, whereas the psychiatrist deals with what you can call mental.
Okay, and here you have, we're going to be dealing with all the changes that happens as we age.
That is correct.
Why is it that as we age, you reach out to make a call, and you suddenly forget? You run upstairs to pick up something, you suddenly forget what you went up there, and you just be pacing and say, what exactly did I come here to look for? What is it about the brain? Where does it start aging? How does it age? Please.
Good.
What has aging got to do with our brain?
Good. When you say you get up to go and make a call,
Yeah.
and you forget
Who was I going to call?
the person you are going to call,
Yes.
in getting up to make that call, you knew at that point in time
Yes.
whom you were going to call.
Yes.
But a few moments after that,
You forget. Just split
it's
second.
all gone. Well, what this is telling us is that the brain, unlike a computer, is flesh and blood. And when you want to make a call, for example, the thought of it comes to your mind, you know the person you want to call. And that thought is registered in your brain by way of the firing together of certain nerves in the brain. But it could be that fragile that unless you really continue to focus attention on it or continue to remind yourself of it, any distraction could make that pattern of nerves, which represented the thought of your wanting to make a call, simply fade or be interfered with by something else that has now taken your attention.
Does that have anything to do with because you're aging?
What this has to do, and indeed what it could have to do with aging, is as follows. That's why I said at the beginning that the brain is not a computer, it is something living. The brain uses its own nerves to do all its work. Now, for that pattern, which represents the thought of your wanting to make a call, to last, and for you to continue to remember what you want to do. A number of conditions have to be fulfilled. Number one, the chemicals that are active in the process of establishing that pattern in your brain must be adequate and contribute to keeping alive of that network. And two, the very nerves themselves, which form part of that network, must be in a healthy state. As you age, both are affected. Yes, you begin to produce less of these chemicals that we call neurotransmitters, just meaning that they transmit information from one nerve to the other. You produce less of them. And the very nerves themselves, between which you have the transmission taking place, are beginning to lose their branches, beginning to lose their robustness, beginning to lose the points on them that are like antenna on which the medium of information acts. So definitely, in the case of somebody who's advancing in age, those traces are not likely to be that strong and remain effective when you compare what's happening in him to what will happen in the brain of a young person, where the structure is still very robust and all the chemicals needed to be used in the forming of that pattern are still in very ample supply.
At what age do you think this takes place? At what age do you think all the neurotransmitters are no longer robust? At what age? Is it when we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s, or it starts as early as?
Indeed, the kind of changes you've been talking about would normally be experienced maybe anytime from your 40s, but getting worse
As you progress.
Progressively. Yeah. But it so happens that the brain is really at its peak at about age 20. In which case, if you took a 30-year-old and you subjected him to some tests, especially tests that test the reaction time, the speed of reacting to a stimulus, you find that even in the 30-year-old, things are already slowing down. But you wouldn't be experiencing the senior moments, which are the ones you are referring to.
The indignities, that's the one I call the indignities and the insults.
Not just yet.
Yes.
But these changes begin quite early, and the manifestations will be different from one age group to the other.
Why is it very prominent with menopausal women and andropausal men? Why is it prominent at that time? Does it have anything to do with the reduction in the production of hormones?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, before you go into menopause, before you go into andropause, you must have attained a certain age.
Yes.
In any case. In addition, you then have the drop in the level of the reproductive hormones.
Yes.
It so happens that the reproductive hormones, even though they are labeled reproductive hormones, do carry out many other functions in the body. For example, take the woman who goes into menopause.
Yes.
That is when her estrogen will begin to plummet,
her progesterone
also plummet. But both estrogen and progesterone have very powerful effects on the brain And through their effects on the brain, they do affect the mind and the way it works and the state in which it finds itself. To be more specific, estrogen, for example, is known to act very powerfully on two parts of the brain. And one of the parts that I want to mention is just the very part that you need to make memory permanent.
Doctor, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. This is getting interesting. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the insults of aging and why and how the brain ages and the symptoms of an aging brain. And we have in the studio with us Dr. Abayomi Ayesimoju, who is talking to us about all those kinds of issues. Doctor, please go ahead. You say estrogen plays a part in
brain function.
Yes.
And I was going to talk about two parts of the brain on which estrogen is known to be very active, and which, when the level of estrogen drops, the functions of those two parts are affected. The one part is the part of the brain where you transfer memory from what you're thinking of now to a longer term memory. And the other part is right here in the frontal part of the brain. And that is the part of the brain with which we actually do our thinking. The two of us, as we are talking now, we're using this part very actively. I'm using that to make sure I keep in mind what you've said,
yes,
hold it in my mind, and also respond to what you're saying. It also happens that this same part is the part you use for planning, for decision making, and for making sound judgment. You can imagine that part of the brain being adversely affected by a plummeting level of estrogen. Then it's not surprising that not only would memory begin to decline
yes,
in menopause, other mental symptoms will also accompany it.
Don't men forget
Yes.
they're having andropause?
Yes, indeed, it isn't just estrogen among the reproductive hormones
Yes.
that has an influence on the brain.
Yes.
Progesterone also has, and so does testosterone.
Okay.
Which is
what the men have, and the reduction of it that causes the andropause.
The reduction of that testosterone also has its manifestations on brain function.
And it also has effects on the strength,
Of course, strength. Muscle strength.
Muscle strength.
Yes,
okay.
yes, definitely. So all the reproductive hormones are very active on the brain also, apart from the reproductive functions that they carry out in the body. So if a level of any of those hormones falls, it has its effect on the brain and therefore its mental manifestations.
What can we do? What can the aging citizens, what can we do? Is there a certain lifestyle that can enable us sustain these levels of these hormones as we age? Is there a lifestyle? Is there anything we can do to enable us sustain this? Or is it a process that, well, there's nothing you can do, live with it?
Oh, there is a lot you can do.
Yes.
Because wherever the balance falls will depend on what is working against what.
Yes.
There's a lot everybody can do to strengthen the brain and also support it and enhance it so that whatever is left of the inevitable natural processes, the balance will still be such that you may feel nothing at all, or if anything, very little. You've spoken, for example, about lifestyle. So maybe we can just look at lifestyle. It is interesting that the brain, being the mental organ, one of the most important ways of keeping it strong is by using it. In other words, it's been found that the more you use your brain, the higher your level of education, for example, is. It tells in the long run how long your brain lasts you.
Really?
Yes.
So you mean people with combined honors, doctorate, double honors?
Those are the findings. But however, it isn't so much your degree that matters.
Academic qualification.
It isn't so much. It's just that when that was looked into,
Yes.
that was the finding. But what's important is to keep the brain active. To be active socially, be it within the family, in your community, in your religious organizations, in your general social.
Just keep exercising the brain.
Engage your mind. Learn. Don't be so scared about new things. Be ready to learn. Be ready to be flexible. Be ready to adapt to changing times. A brain that does this is less likely to suffer much when age, in quotes, begins to catch up. And then, of course, keeping to lifestyle, exercise.
Doc, you just, we'll be right back. You're welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Aging Gracefully. We discuss all the insults of aging and how they assault all your bodily process once you cross that bar 50. And Dr. Abayomi Ayesimoju is here to educate us on what we can do to stop the deteriorating effects, degenerative effects of some of those insults as we age. Doctor? Yes, you were talking about exercise.
Yes, that exercise is one of the most important things you can do.
Now, we're not talking about mental exercise.
No,
we're talking about physical exercise.
I'm now talking about physical exercise.
Yes.
One of the most important things you can do to help your brain remain vital, in the sense that it will give you the needed blood supply to your brain. The blood will give the brain the nutrients it needs, not to mention the fact that exercise itself actually produces certain hormone factors that help in making the brain sprout more branches. And of course, if you want to keep your brain for long, still keeping to lifestyle, you will avoid habits like smoking. You will avoid habits like self-medication.
And which is what we all indulge in.
Yes, and many of these things have ruinous effects on the brain, depending on what the medication may be. Of course, you should have a positive attitude, because it's been found that those who have a better self-image regarding their health and have a less hostile attitude, they fare better as far as the state of the brain goes in the long run.
In aging.
Yes. And then stress. Stress is a brain killer.
Which means that we Nigerians are almost dead because you're stressed about lights, you're stressed about anything.
Exactly,
so
especially if you're ignorant about this fact. And because you are ignorant, you do not take measures to manage your stress. stress does kill brain cells.
Doc, briefly, which we will do at a later date, if all the symptoms, the initial symptoms, are ignored, what are the long consequences? Because we know that we've known people to suffer from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and all those things. Are all these consequences of neglecting these immediate signs as we start aging?
Definitely, if you have those signs and you do nothing about that fact, of course, whatever forces have brought those signs into being will continue to work, move things in the direction in which they're pushing, and you are not doing anything to try and counter the effect of those forces. Definitely, because many of these things that I've said, for example, they are also known risk factors, even as far as Alzheimer's is concerned. In fact, when you talk about Alzheimer's, you find that whatever is good for your heart, for example, is good for your brain. And all the risk factors to do with heart disease are also risk factors for Alzheimer's.
Is it possible not to go through any of these indignities of aging, an aging brain? Is it possible? Or it's a process that every man, as long as you age, it's something that you must go through?
It depends on how long you live.
That's what I'm saying. As long as you live and you're aging, is it a process that you must go through? Those insults and indignities, are they things you must go through?
I would say that to some extent, even the best amongst us will still show evidence of aging, even though it may not come to the level of embarrassment or something you can call indignity. It's just natural that aging itself takes place. What manifests as a consequence will depend on the efforts you make to counter the natural effect of aging.
This insults of aging on the brain, do they in any way affect any other part of the body? Because I know from the brain it controls so many other things.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. In fact, you've put it very well.
Thank you.
That because of the central controlling role of the brain, there will hardly be any part of the body that will not be affected by the state of the brain. Because the state of the brain, for example, would even determine your own attitude, will influence your decisions as to what you do about other things affecting other parts of the body. So indeed, I think it is safer to look at the brain as playing that central role, which influences every other aspect of bodily function.
And that's why you should give it all the attention
Yes, definitely.
it deserves.
Definitely.
Doc, I thank you very much for coming, and we'll invite you to come back and discuss all the other consequences if you're elected.
Thank you.
Because we want to age gracefully, and knowing that these are processes we have to go through. And for everyone out there, take care of, even if you don't have any of these insults of aging, and you're still at that age where you have the time and the opportunity to do something, exercise your brain, like Dr. Shimoju has said, exercise to help you maintain a good, healthy brain while you still have time. And for those of you like me who have crossed the 50s line and you're suffering any of those insults, well, it's not too late. Take all the advice that Dr. Shimoju has given here, and along the line we'll discuss all the consequences if you do not start doing something about what is happening to you right now. Thank you, viewers. It's been wonderful just talking to you about this issue, and you have a wonderful week ahead of you, and God bless you.